Story 1. I was in the back of a laundromat getting change when I saw a man walk up to my unattended basket, grab a pair of my dirty underwear, and casually walk out the door with them. I was too shocked in the moment to react. Story 2. I saw my brother push my son over when he was 2 years old. My son has a physical disability, so he wasn't very steady on his feet. My brother didn't know I was in the next room watching. He went up to him and shoved my son in the head, knocking him to the ground. I immediately jumped up and reacted, but he denied it. My mother believed him and accused me of lying and being dramatic. Now they both wonder why they are not allowed to see my children, and that was one of the tamest things they have done. My brother would have been in his late 30s at the time. Story 3. A woman in her 40s, well-dressed in expensive clothes and accessories, was feeding a group of pigeons while sitting on a bench. Suddenly, she lunged forward, trapping a pigeon with her body, catching it with her hands, and rolling it in her coat. She then looked around and left. What was that about? My wife and I have a theory that she might have had an exotic animal to which she was feeding the pigeon. It's also possible that she was under the influence of medication. We live in a financial capital, and some people in the investment banking crowd appear to be struggling with mental health issues. Story 4. I was flying solo on a long-haul flight many years ago. I had the window seat, which left me feeling trapped. A middle-aged lady sat next to me in the middle seat, even though the aisle seat was free the entire flight. Periodically, she licked her hands like a cat for 10 hours, big, slobbery wet licks. The worst part was the stale saliva scent lingering in the air. I was close to vomiting throughout the entire flight. It was grim. Story 5. As a manager, the bar owner called me while on a 2-week vacation. There is thousands of dollars missing. Money has been short at closing all week, and the assistant manager, who was acting as manager in my absence, is blaming our new bartender. The owner asked if I knew anyone who could set up a surveillance system quickly and discreetly. The assistant manager was taken away in handcuffs. The owner was aware of the situation, as she was his niece. He needed that evidence for personal reasons. Story 6. I caught my former friend trying to take inappropriate photos of the cheerleaders at our child's football game. We are talking about 10th grade girls here. I called him out in public and then immediately distanced myself from him. His wife left him and took the kids about a year ago. Story 7. At an apartment I no longer live in, I would go out on my patio and smoke a cigarette or two before going to bed. Some nights, a neighbor would come out on his patio with a stack of comic books or manga. He would then spit into his hand and use a page from the comic book he was reading to clean up afterward. Story 8. I watched a man with 2 younger boys sitting in a grocery trolley grab one by the head and neck when the little boy took a cereal box and put it into his father's cart. The father yanked the boy out of the cart, threw him on the ground, and screamed at him for about a minute before I stepped in between them. Other shoppers were frozen in shock. I did all I could to stop the assault on this poor child until a store employee came up and asked the man to exit the premises. The man continued to yell and strike this boy mercilessly until a woman watching stepped up to intervene. She took a hard punch to the face and collapsed on the pavement. Her partner, a skinny man with glasses, proceeded to defend her until the attacker was unconscious. We called the police again 20 minutes after the first call. The children were in shock. The police arrested the man, and that was the last I heard of the incident. I often wonder if those kids escaped from that situation. Story 9. I saw a man at the library gently stroking the pages of a book as if he were petting a cat. He was whispering to it as well. There were no headphones and no one else nearby. It was just him and the book sharing a moment. Story 10. My brother used to manage a small call center, and there was one employee who always volunteered to do the night shift alone. After a night out, curiosity got the better of my brother, so while walking home, he stopped by the office and looked in the window. The night shift employee had his trousers around his ankles and was viewing inappropriate content. My brother backed off and didn't disturb him. Needless to say, internet monitoring and blocking measures were introduced shortly afterward. Story 11. A girl in my class was removing lice from her hair and putting it on the girl sitting in front of her. This is sociopathic behavior. Story 12. I was living in an apartment in a building that was formerly a manor house, a century old with lots of unique and strange elements. I was getting ready for work, and the bathroom window overlooked the parking lot. A neighbor from the building came out to his car, walked past a small gum tree growing in the garden bed, and stopped. He started tearing off the branches and leaves from the little tree, even winding pieces in a circle to tear it apart. He basically killed the tree by the end and then got in his car and left for work. He had no idea I saw him, and I moved out shortly afterward. It was disturbing. Story 13. Flying with friends. I was in the window seat of another aisle. A couple sat next to me and had sneaked drinks in. They were intoxicated. It was a long flight. Eventually, I saw the woman's hand disappear under her husband's jacket on his lap, and movement was occurring. I kept my eyes forward with headphones on until I felt his thigh pressing against mine. I took a quick glance, and the woman's head was now under the jacket. I didn't feel comfortable confronting them, but this was Delta Airlines, and they had in-flight Wi-Fi, so I texted my friend to let them know what was going on and requested help. A flight attendant approached them to inform them that an officer would be waiting for them as soon as we landed and that they needed to stop. They complained about how some people just don't know how to have fun and that their vacation was being ruined. I had to give my name and number to the officer, but I was never contacted. Story 14. More like criminal instead of creepy. I witnessed a coworker and paramedic trying to slip a huge diamond ring off an altered patient's finger to steal. I grabbed his wrist and said, "Put it back. No one is safe." Story 15. I was teaching during the COVID-19 pandemic with online classes. The behavior I observed from students with their cameras and microphones was disturbing. For these sessions, we used breakout rooms that I would rotate through to answer questions. This was college engineering. I witnessed inappropriate behavior, including drug use, someone using the restroom loudly while wearing a wireless headset in the main class lobby, and intimate activities involving other people as well as themselves. It would have been considerate to turn off their cameras and microphones before engaging in such activities for the group's sake. Another incident involved a person having a personal conversation with an anime body pillow. One student kept sticking his finger into his eye and turning his eyelids inside out, which was alarming. Another individual was harming himself discreetly, which I felt obligated to report. These were wild times. Story 16. I saw the new kid at work urinate in the sink in the break room, and then he chased me down, telling me he was on autopilot. Story 17. I observed a girl on the subway digging deep in her nostril, examining her finger intently before eating whatever she found. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. She was turning it into a full meal. Meanwhile, she was surrounded by other passengers. I watched for a while before looking away and briefly locking eyes with another stranger who shared a look of absolute disgust. Story 18. I did not see it personally, but a friend of a friend was dog-sitting and decided to use my friend's roommate's nail clippers to clip the dog's toenails. They then threw the clippings into a candy dish on the coffee table. Story 19. There is an older woman at work who is nearing 60. Occasionally, I see her pulling petals and heads off the flowers and then eating them. None of us can figure out why she does it. Story 20. A friend and I were stuck in traffic on a Los Angeles freeway. The guy in the next car was picking his nose. We were watching him and he looked over, shocked that we were watching. I held up a tissue box, motioning if he wanted one. We all laughed a lot. Story 21. The unusual student in class was moving his hand vigorously in his trouser pocket while looking at photos of tied-up feet on his browser. This was during an adult education class. Story 22. I worked at a popular thrift store chain, and one of my coworkers made me uncomfortable. One day, while we were closing, I caught him sniffing some used little girl's clothing. I reported this to my supervisor and never saw him again. Thinking about that still gives me the creeps. Story 23. I saw a middle-aged man stop and creep through a bush to watch a group of high school girls practicing soccer. My area of Houston, Texas is not great. Story 24. It was late at night, and a neighbor I had over but didn't really know well was sitting in my house, looking out the window and rocking back and forth, saying, "I can't," over and over again. A couple of weeks later, he was standing outside and staring at my house in the rain. Eventually, I ended up moving since the storm. Story 25. I was working on a job site and saw another worker walk by, but he didn't notice me. The guy shoved his whole hand up his rear and itched it. I nicknamed him Schfingers. Story 26. I watched a girl take a selfie and then analyze it as if it owed her rent. Her expression changed more times than a shapeshifter under stress. Story 27. Antwerp's red light district featured a man engaging in inappropriate behavior behind a glass container while staring at one of the girls in the windows. However, everyone else seemed to notice it except for him. Story 28. A man was filming a band about 40 feet away at a dive bar gig, then zoomed in on a girl's backside when she was about 10 feet away from him. Story 29. I saw my cousin's son in his backyard swinging a cat by its tail. When the cat became disoriented, he threw it on the ground and kicked it like a football. It happened so quickly that when I realized what I was witnessing, I rushed out to check if the cat was okay. It was dead, having clearly died of fright, pain, and terror. This child is truly cruel. He caused his sister's dog to suffer brain damage by throwing it headfirst against a brick wall as a puppy. The dog was left with lasting injuries that prevented it from walking properly, and it just stared blankly into space. My cousin continued to buy and replace animals for him. Now, he has escalated to harming humans. One night, he tried to stab his father because he was told to go to bed since it was a school night. He is now a teenager and is getting worse. Story 30. It somewhat applies to the person who was caught taking pictures of his friend's girlfriend's bare feet while they were all lounging around. His camera flash went off, leading everyone to suspect that mischief was happening. Story 31. My roommate's foster puppy was tied to a pole by the staircase on our porch. The dog had gone down the stairs, but because his leash was attached to the pole around the corner of the stair railing, he couldn't get back up or turn around. He was struggling against the leash and was clearly in distress. She watched this happen and did nothing, just staring blankly. I went in, fixed his leash, and expressed my concern about him potentially injuring himself on the stairs. I pointed out that he was clearly in pain, and she responded, "If he goes, he goes. And if he dies, he dies," ranting about how she doesn't care and how much she does for him. She called him evil and satanic and said he could go to hell, even though he was actually a well-behaved puppy. Later, I saw her dragging him by the leash and overheard her boyfriend making her promise to be nice to the puppy while he was away. I knew he was getting adopted soon, and the new owners mentioned they didn't like how roughly she treated him. Meanwhile, this girl is vegan and claims to be all about animals, community, peace, and the environment. People think she's very kind-hearted and wonderful, making it hard for me to convince them of what I witnessed because of how she presents herself to the world. No one believed me. Story 32. A middle-aged man was in the doctor's office waiting room the other day, with his finger up his nose for half a minute and then in his mouth for the other half. Story 33. We had a plumber come to our workplace to examine our toilets. I had an office with one-way windows, allowing me to see out to the front parking lot while ensuring no one could see inside. I saw the plumber walking up, stopping about 10 feet from the front door. He stuck his hand down to his wrist in the back of his pants, moved it around, then pulled it out and sniffed it, making a face before walking inside the building. Once he passed reception and was out of earshot, I informed the receptionist, and we sanitized everything he touched on his way in and again when he left. It was so gross. Story 34. I observed a true sociopath in a forensic hospital transition from ingratiating behavior and micro-expressions to a completely expressionless face once the individual left, believing no one was watching. Story 35. I had been living in New York City for about 1 or 2 years. I was walking through a nice neighborhood when someone was placing a couch on the sidewalk. I asked if it was free of bedbugs, and they said they were just getting new furniture. I walked back about half a block to call my roommate, and I saw a man also walking toward the couch, so I returned to its side to claim it. I pretended not to see him, but he hopped the steel fence and hid in some woods. Yes, there are woods in New York City in the Heights. He just stared at me until my roommate showed up and helped me take the couch the 10 blocks back to our apartment. Story 36. A kid a grade below me on stage during play rehearsal just started scratching, and later, while walking down the stairs, began rubbing against the stair railings. Story 37. An old friend of mine would go into his pants and scratch himself, then proceed to smell the residue left on his hands, poke his nose, and eat the substances that were present. Story 38. I looked out my bedroom window when I heard two people talking and saw a lady walking her dog, chatting with someone she clearly knew. She repeatedly ran her hand through her hair and scratched her head with the hand that was holding a full dog waste bag. It was a big dog. I gagged. Story 39. This was more amusing than disturbing. I was on my bike and pulled up behind a car at a red light. The driver was staring out the passenger window. I looked over and saw an attractive woman in a low-cut top bent over trying to untangle a hose, revealing a lot of cleavage. I considered honking, but I was concerned he might rear-end the car in front of him. He was definitely paying attention to the light. Story 40. Yesterday, I was with my daughter at the grocery store when I noticed a man with a girl who was young enough to be his daughter. He was wearing a mask, which caught my attention as it seemed like he didn't want anyone to see his face in public. The girl was dressed in a way that sought attention, wearing short shorts and a tight top, something I would not want my daughter to wear in public. She had cuts on her legs, self-inflicted, as they were neatly done one under the other. As a father, I would be seeking help for her instead of letting her show them off. There was just something about them that was unsettling. Story 41. I was 12 when I started having night terrors. They came out of nowhere. 1 minute, I'd be asleep. The next, I'd be thrashing, screaming, my heart racing as if something were in the room with me. My parents did what they could, but they were exhausted. Sleep was rare for all of us back then. That night wasn't supposed to be different from the others. It started like so many before it. I tossed and turned, then woke up in a half-dreaming state, my body heavy with exhaustion but my mind buzzing with leftover scraps of nightmare. The house was quiet, the air thick with that eerie stillness that only exists at 3 in the morning. I got up, rubbed my eyes, and stumbled to the bathroom. I didn't turn on the light. I never did. I was used to moving around in the dark. Besides, I was barely awake, just focused on emptying my bladder and getting back to bed. My limbs felt sluggish, my eyelids heavy. Then I saw the movement, a shadow, barely noticeable in my peripheral vision. I turned my head slightly, still groggy, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. And then I saw him, a man. He stood by the other door to the bathroom, the one that led into my sister's room, just standing there, staring. He was wearing a tattered gray jumpsuit like an old prison uniform. His skin looked pale and sickly in the dim light, and his head was nearly bald with sparse, uneven patches of hair clinging to his scalp. One of his arms rested against a crutch. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I sat there, breath shallow, hands gripping the sink, unable to look away. And then, I was in the basement. I don't remember running. I don't remember the stairs. I don't remember how I got to where my parents slept. But suddenly I was there, sobbing and hysterical. My dad woke up immediately. My mom too. What happened? My dad's voice was rough with sleep, but when he saw my face, he was fully awake. What's wrong? I couldn't get the words out at first. I just shook my head, gasping, trying to force air into my lungs. Finally, I managed to choke it out. There's someone in the house. My dad didn't waste time. He grabbed the baseball bat he kept near the bed and went upstairs. I sat curled on the couch, my mom's arms around me, shivering so hard my teeth chattered. Minutes passed. Then my dad came back down. His face was unreadable. There's no one there, he said. I checked the bathroom and the kitchen. The doors are all locked. I tried to argue, tried to tell him what I saw, but he just shook his head. It was a dream, he said. It's okay. You can sleep down here tonight. I didn't argue. I knew what I had seen. I knew I hadn't imagined it. But if my dad said the house was safe, I had to believe him. I curled up on the couch, my mom stayed with me for a while, and my dad went back to bed. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Then, about an hour later, I heard it. A sound from upstairs. A soft, unmistakable sound. The sliding bathroom door opening. I held my breath. Then, footsteps. Uneven. Slow. Limping. I was frozen. I wanted to scream for my dad. But something in me knew I shouldn't. I had to stay silent. The footsteps moved toward the kitchen. Then nothing. I lay there, my body rigid with terror, waiting, listening. The house was silent again. I didn't sleep at all. When morning finally came, I told my dad what I'd heard. He didn't dismiss me this time. Instead, he grabbed his bat again and went upstairs to check the house in the daylight. This time, he found something. The fridge door was slightly open. The pantry, too. Boxes of food had been knocked over. Some were missing. Someone had been in our house. I'll never forget the look on my dad's face when he realized it wasn't just my imagination. He checked the locks again, walked around the house looking for any sign of how the man got in or out. We never found him. The police were called, but nothing ever came of it. No forced entry. No real evidence. Just a lingering feeling of unease. I never saw the man again. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding for no reason, I wonder, what if he had never left? Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.